SUA assassins filled the hall. The alien woman's human guard smiled and bolted the door. Why would a human guard smile when assassins filled the hall? And why, with danger already surrounding them, would he deliberately bolt the door? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. It's great to have you here for another journey into the unknown. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Thank you for spending your time with us and for continuing to support the channel. Your presence here truly means a lot. And before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? Now, let's begin the story. Tell me, human, did you lock that door to keep them out, or to keep us in? Soraya Vare's voice was almost lost beneath the low emergency hum of Concord Hall, but Ethan Cole heard every word. He stood with one hand wrapped around the cold steel lever of the ancient mechanical bolt, his shoulders square beneath a charcoal diplomatic jacket that suddenly felt far too formal for the moment. 30 feet ahead, unfamiliar figures had spread across the crystalline hall, silently occupying every clear path between Soraya and the exits. Behind Ethan, the last open doorway offered a narrow strip of silver light and the possibility of escape. He looked at it once. Then he pushed the door shut. The hinges groaned. The sound rolled beneath the vaulted ceiling like distant thunder. Soraya stared at him, her cobalt blue skin catching the pale emergency lights, silver markings along her temples shimmering whenever she turned her head. Cole. Clang. Ethan slid the bolt into place. The mechanism was primitive by Vare standards. Half an inch of hardened alloy. No circuitry, no biometric scanner, nothing sophisticated enough to hack from across the room. Just metal meeting metal. Reliable. Honest. Final. For the first time since she had met him, Soraya saw the human smile. It wasn't broad. It wasn't cruel. It was the small, almost tired smile of a man who had finally confirmed something he had suspected for hours. You realize, she said carefully, that was our exit. Ethan rolled his shoulders and listened. Ventilation fans whispered behind the walls. Emergency lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere beyond the sealed door, hurried footsteps crossed the outer corridor and then stopped. He counted the seconds without moving his lips. 1, 2, 3. Nobody tried the handle. Interesting. The air inside Concord Hall smelled faintly of ozone, polished stone, and the sharp mineral fragrance of Vare ceremonial incense. 6 hours earlier, those smells had belonged to diplomacy. Now every sound seemed louder. Soraya's measured breathing, the soft vibration beneath the floor, the distant click of shoes against crystal. I noticed, Ethan said. Soraya stepped closer. At 6'6", she stood several inches taller than him, carrying herself with the effortless authority of a woman accustomed to rooms becoming quiet when she entered them. Ethan had spent most of the day being reminded that she commanded fleets, negotiated borders, and belonged to a civilization that considered humans enthusiastic newcomers to galactic politics. Yet her amber eyes were no longer studying him like an inconvenient Earth attachment assigned to her security detail. She was trying to understand him. There are assassins in this hall, she said. And you just removed our safest route out. Ethan glanced toward the sealed door, then toward the figures ahead. His pulse remained steady. He had spent 6 hours checking entrances, ventilation shafts, security rotations, electronic locks, and one wonderfully obsolete mechanical bolt everyone else had ignored. Now the pieces had finally stopped pretending they were unrelated. Safest route, he murmured. Another sound came from outside the door. Not knocking. Waiting. Ethan's smile disappeared. That was the part Soraya hadn't noticed yet. He had. He shifted half a step until he stood naturally between her and the open hall. Stay close to me. Soraya's eyes narrowed. That is not an explanation. No. Ethan watched the room and listened to the silence beyond the door. It's the reason you're still here to demand one. 6 hours earlier, Soraya Vare had believed Earth had sent her an unnecessary human guard. Now, standing beside a locked door with danger on both sides, she was beginning to wonder whether Earth had known something she didn't. 6 hours earlier, Ethan Cole had been standing beneath a ceiling made of translucent crystal while 3 Vare security officers quietly decided he was useless. He knew because they were speaking English. Earth calls this a diplomatic protection specialist. One of them asked, making no effort to lower his voice. Ethan continued examining the entrance to Concord Hall as if he had heard nothing. The doorway rose nearly 15 feet above him, framed by silver alloy and fitted with enough electronic security to make a bank vault look welcoming. His fingers brushed the older mechanical bolt recessed into the frame. Cold steel. Manual operation. No network connection. He liked it immediately. Perhaps humans select guards by height, another officer said. Ethan glanced over. All three Vares stood taller than 6 feet 5 inches, wearing polished ceremonial armor and expressions of professional disappointment. If that helps, Ethan said. I am considered reasonably tall back home. None of them laughed. Mr. Cole. The voice came from behind him, calm and musical, carrying authority without needing volume. Ethan turned. Soraya Vare crossed the polished floor with 2 diplomatic aides following several steps behind her. Her cobalt blue skin reflected the white light overhead, while faint silver patterns at her temples shifted with each movement. She wore a dark formal coat bearing the crest of the Vare Dominion, but there was nothing ornamental about the way she watched him. She was evaluating equipment. Ethan suspected he was the equipment. You have been examining that door for 11 minutes, she said. 9, Ethan replied. Her amber eyes narrowed slightly. Is there a meaningful difference? 2 minutes. One of her aides looked offended. Soraya merely studied him longer. My security commander tells me you have requested access to ventilation plans, maintenance tunnels, kitchen deliveries, electrical diagrams, staff records, and environmental controls. Correct. You also asked whether the ceremonial fountains share a pressure system with the fire suppression network. They do. Why does my bodyguard care about fountains? Ethan looked toward the center of the enormous hall. Hundreds of empty seats curved around the diplomatic platform. Above them, suspended banners moved gently in conditioned air. Everything looked elegant, controlled, predictable. That bothered him. Because everyone else is looking for weapons, he said. I am looking for problems. Soraya folded her hands behind her back. You have never protected a diplomat before. It was not a question. No, you have never served in a royal security unit. No. Then perhaps you can explain why Earth assigned you to me. Ethan considered giving her the polished answer from his briefing. Interstellar cooperation. Cultural exchange. Mutual confidence between Earth and the Vare Dominion. Instead, he gave her the truth. Because somebody thinks you are going to die. The hall seemed to become quieter. Even the security officers stopped smiling. Soraya's expression did not change, but the silver markings near her temples dimmed by a shade. That is a remarkable thing to say to the woman you are supposed to reassure. I was not hired to reassure you. Ethan turned toward the nearest service corridor. A maintenance worker had just emerged carrying a diagnostic case. Nothing unusual there, except the worker glanced toward Soraya before checking the floor number on the wall. Someone who worked here should already know which floor he was on. Ethan watched him disappear around the corner. What were you hired to do? Soraya asked. Ethan waited until the footsteps faded. Make sure you are still alive tomorrow. For the first time, her composure shifted. Not fear. Curiosity. And if I do not want your protection? Ethan looked back at the mechanical bolt, then at the immaculate hall prepared for peace. Then today is going to be complicated. Complicated is a word humans use when they do not wish to admit something is dangerous, Soraya said as she walked toward the diplomatic platform. Ethan followed 3 paces behind, close enough to intervene, far enough to avoid looking ceremonial. We also use it when the coffee machine stops working, he said. Your language lacks precision. Keeps conversations interesting. Soraya glanced back, and Ethan caught the faintest shift in her expression. Almost amusement. Almost. She moved through Concord Hall as if the building belonged to her, although technically it belonged to no one. The station had been constructed above Valis as neutral ground, a place where rival governments could meet without surrendering status. Beyond the crystal walls, the planet curved beneath them in bands of violet cloud and silver ocean. It was beautiful enough to make a person forget that 2 fleets waited several thousand miles apart beyond the atmosphere. Ethan did not forget. He watched reflections instead. Doors, hands, service carts. The subtle movements people made when they thought important eyes were looking elsewhere. Soraya stopped beside the central table. You keep expecting danger. Occupational habit. Your occupation, according to your record, was rescue. Ethan looked at her. So she had read more than the summary. Hostile environment rescue. Earth sent a rescuer to guard someone who does not require rescue. That sounds like something we should both hope stays true. Soraya rested one blue hand against the edge of the table. Among my people, protection is earned through strength. A leader who cannot protect herself has no right to command others. Ethan checked the nearest balcony. 2 Ver officers. Correct insignia. Correct posture. One kept watching the crowd entrance instead of Soraya. Good. Earth has a different idea, he said. I noticed. Humans appear unusually comfortable placing themselves in danger for strangers. Not all of us. You did. Ethan's attention returned to her. Soraya continued before he could answer. Your personnel file mentions Orison Station. The name landed softly and carried more weight than it should have. Ethan smelled smoke that was not there. Heard alarms buried years beneath memory. He pushed both away. Files make everything sound cleaner than it was. You were ordered to evacuate. Yes. You returned. There were still people inside. Soraya studied him as if that answer violated some law of physics. You disobeyed a direct withdrawal order for people you did not know. Ethan adjusted his cuff. They knew themselves. Seemed sufficient. Silence settled between them. Above, the ventilation system changed cycles with a low mechanical sigh. Cool air touched Ethan's face. Too cool. He looked toward the western vents. Your species is strange, Soraya said. I have heard that before. You mistake sacrifice for virtue. Sometimes. And you believe survival alone does not determine worth. Ethan turned fully toward her. Do you? Soraya's amber eyes held his. For the first time, neither rank nor species seemed to occupy the space between them. I believe the living are the ones who get to answer that question. Then we agree on the important part. A soft chime announced that the ceremony would begin in 5 hours. Staff moved faster. Doors opened. Translators activated. The great hall slowly awakened around them. Soraya started toward her delegation, then paused. Ethan. It was the first time she had used his first name. If your instincts tell you something is wrong, tell me before you do anything dramatic. He looked again toward the western ventilation grill. A thin ribbon of condensation had formed along its lower edge. The room was 71 degrees. That vent should not have been cold enough to sweat. Ethan's attention sharpened. Soraya. She stopped. Something is wrong. Show me, Soraya said. Ethan did not answer immediately. He crossed the polished floor toward the western wall, where a narrow line of moisture trembled beneath the ventilation grill. The air smelled different here, cleaner than it should have, carrying the sterile bite of industrial coolant beneath the ceremonial incense. Ethan raised his hand near the vent without touching it. Cold air brushed his knuckles. This system is running below normal temperature. Soraya joined him. Perhaps environmental control adjusted for the arriving delegations. Then every vent would be doing it. Ethan pointed across the hall. The eastern grill remained dry. He crouched beside the wall panel and studied the maintenance seal. No scratches. No obvious tampering. That was almost worse. Good sabotage rarely announced itself. You think someone altered it? I think 3 things in this room bother me. Soraya folded her arms. Only 3. Give me another hour. He stood and nodded toward the north entrance. A Ver security officer had been posted there since Ethan arrived. His armor was immaculate, his identification marker correct, his posture disciplined. His boots were wrong. The soles were clean. Every other guard who had crossed the station's docking corridor carried a faint gray dust along the edges from construction outside the transit ring. This man had none. That officer, Ethan said quietly. What about him? New boots. Soraya stared at Ethan. That is your evidence. It is my second problem. And the third. Ethan looked upward. One of the security cameras above the diplomatic platform was angled slightly toward the western balcony instead of the central table. 11 degrees, maybe 12. Not enough for most people to notice. Enough to leave part of Soraya's route outside its view. Camera 7. Soraya followed his gaze. It is functioning. That is not the same as watching the right place. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she touched the communication device at her collar. Commander Tal Varek, verify the identity of the officer at North Entrance and send technical staff to inspect environmental control and camera 7. Quietly, Ethan glanced at her. You believe me? No. Her amber eyes remained on the suspicious guard. I believe uncertainty deserves investigation. I can work with that. They moved toward the central platform while technicians entered through a side corridor. Ethan kept his pace casual. The hall continued filling with sound. Chairs sliding into position, translation systems chiming, service carts humming over crystal flooring. Peace looked remarkably similar to preparation for a wedding, he thought. Everyone dressed well, everyone smiled, and half the room secretly disliked the other half. Are humans always this suspicious? Soraya asked. Only when we are awake. That earned him something unmistakable this time. A brief smile. It vanished quickly, but Ethan saw it. Then his attention shifted to a maintenance worker crossing the upper gallery. Same gray uniform as before. Same diagnostic case. The worker stopped at a junction, looked left, then right, as though deciding where to go. Ethan remembered him checking the floor number earlier. A station technician lost twice in his own workplace. Stay here, Ethan said. That sounded suspiciously like an order. Consider it enthusiastic advice. He headed toward the gallery stairs. By the time he reached the upper level, the worker was gone. A service door stood partly open. Ethan pushed it wider. The corridor beyond was narrow and cold, illuminated by pale utility strips. 20 feet ahead, the diagnostic case sat alone on the floor. Ethan approached slowly. No worker. No footsteps. No voices. Just the steady whisper of machinery behind the walls. He crouched beside the case, but did not touch it. Its identification label belonged to Station Environmental Services. The access seal, however, belonged to external communications. Two systems that had no reason to share equipment. Behind him, Soraya's voice came through his earpiece. Ethan, Commander Varek has completed the identity check. He kept his eyes on the abandoned case. And a pause followed. There is no security officer assigned to the north entrance. Ethan rose slowly as the ventilation fans above him stopped all at once. The sudden silence felt colder than the air. Lock down the hall, he said. Now. Lockdown request denied. The station system replied in a calm voice that made Ethan's skin tighten. He stood motionless in the cold maintenance corridor, staring at the abandoned diagnostic case while the ventilation remained silent above him. Authorization conflict detected. Concord Hall security controls are temporarily unavailable. Ethan touched his earpiece. Soraya, get Commander Varek to secure every physical entrance. Nobody enters without direct confirmation from him. You are assuming this is deliberate. I stopped assuming about 3 clues ago. He backed away from the case and returned toward the gallery, resisting the urge to hurry. Running told observers you knew something. Walking gave him time to think. The false guard. The misaligned camera. The altered ventilation. The mislabeled equipment. None of them proved an assassination attempt individually. Together, they formed a pattern, and Ethan had learned years ago that patterns were often warnings delivered before alarms started screaming. When he reached the main hall, Commander Tal Varek was waiting beside Soraya. The Vair officer towered over Ethan in polished silver armor, his expression carved from professional irritation. My personnel are searching for the imposter, Varek said. The ceremony begins in less than 5 hours. We cannot close neutral diplomatic ground because a human dislikes a pair of boots. Ethan looked past him toward the north entrance. Empty now? Cancel the ceremony. Varek stared at him. Soraya did not. That would collapse negotiations that took 14 months to arrange, she said. If I withdraw without evidence, both fleets may interpret it as deliberate rejection. Then postpone it. The opposing delegation leaves orbit tonight. Ethan exhaled slowly. Politics. He had always preferred broken machinery. Machinery usually admitted when something was wrong. How many people will be in this room? 412, Varek answered. Too many. For what? Ethan met his eyes. For anything. A chime sounded from the eastern corridor. A station technician approached quickly, carrying a tablet against his chest. Commander, environmental diagnostics are complete. There is no malfunction in the western ventilation system. Ethan turned. Then why was it running cold? The technician hesitated. According to the system, it was not. Soraya's silver temple markings dimmed. Ethan felt the pieces shift again. Show me. The technician handed him the tablet. Temperature history displayed a perfect 71 degrees across every vent for the previous 12 hours. Too perfect. Ethan had felt the cold himself. He had seen condensation. Someone had not merely altered the ventilation. Someone had altered the record of altering it. We cancel, Ethan said. Soraya stepped closer. I cannot. Soraya, if I walk away today, people who have never stood in this room may pay for it tomorrow. Her voice stayed controlled, but Ethan heard what lived underneath it. Responsibility, not pride. That mattered. You returned to Orison Station because people were still inside, she continued. Do not ask me to abandon millions because something might happen to me. Ethan wanted to argue. Instead, he understood her, which was considerably more inconvenient. For several seconds, they stood beneath the crystal light while the station hummed around them. Fine, he said. The ceremony continues. Varric looked relieved. Soraya did not. She had already learned that Ethan's agreement rarely meant surrender. But I control your route, your position, and every door within 50 feet of you. You are becoming demanding. Occupational habit. And if I refuse, then I become annoying. A quiet breath escaped her that might have been a laugh. Ethan turned toward the service corridor. Something silver caught the light near its threshold. A station access badge lay on the floor. He crouched beside it. The photograph showed the maintenance worker he had followed. The name read Daniel Mercer, Environmental Systems Technician. Commander, Varric said behind him, suddenly quieter. Ethan looked up. 2 security officers had arrived from the maintenance level. Their expressions had changed. We found Mercer, one said. He is alive, but someone confined him in a storage room nearly 2 hours ago. His uniform and credentials are missing. Ethan stared at the badge. The man he had followed had never been a technician. Soraya came to stand beside him. How long has someone been preparing this? She asked. Ethan looked across Concord Hall at the cameras, vents, doors, and hundreds of empty chairs waiting for their guests. Long enough to know exactly how this place works. Then the lights flickered once. Just once. Ethan looked toward the old mechanical bolt on the main door. For the first time that day, he was grateful Concord Hall contained something nobody could control from a computer. If this ceremony continues, you follow my instructions the first time I give them. Ethan said it quietly, standing beside the main entrance while diplomatic staff streamed through security checkpoints around them. 3 hours remained before the signing. Concord Hall had changed since morning. Empty chairs were becoming occupied rows. Translators murmured through sound checks. Service drones floated beneath the crystal ceiling carrying trays of water and ceremonial tokens. Through the transparent western wall, Vallis glowed beneath violet clouds nearly 200 miles below. Everything looked peaceful. Ethan trusted appearances less with every passing minute. Soraya stood beside him in her dark formal coat, watching delegates arrive. You understand that I command 12 fleets. Congratulations. And you are giving me orders. Temporary character development. Her amber eyes shifted toward him. Was that humor? Stress response. This time she smiled without hiding it. Ethan checked the entrance counter. 287 guests admitted. Every identification scan had passed. That meant almost nothing now. Whoever had stolen Daniel Mercer's uniform had demonstrated access to station credentials and internal systems. Ethan had requested independent verification through portable scanners disconnected from Concord Hall's network. Commander Varric had called the precaution excessive. Ethan had called that encouraging. People planning trouble preferred security teams worried about appearing unreasonable. You have been staring at doors for hours, Soraya said. Doors are honest. That may be the strangest human philosophy I have heard today. A door tells you exactly what it does. Open, closed, locked. People get creative. Soraya considered that. And what does that one tell you? She indicated the main entrance. Ethan touched the mechanical bolt recessed into its frame. That somebody designed this station before engineers decided everything needed a computer. You approve? Deeply. Another group entered. Ethan recognized every face from the diplomatic roster except a gray-skinned attendant carrying a case of translation equipment. He raised 2 fingers. Varric's officers intercepted the attendant without spectacle. 30 seconds later, verification cleared him. Ethan relaxed by exactly nothing. You cannot examine 400 people forever, Soraya said. I only need to do it until tomorrow. Her expression softened. You truly mean that? Mean what? Tomorrow. Ethan looked at her. You asked what my job was. You said your job was ensuring I remained alive tomorrow. Still is. Even after learning what continuing this ceremony might cost you. Ethan looked across the hall. Delegates from worlds that had spent 20 years distrusting one another were sitting beneath the same roof. Some avoided eye contact. Others spoke through translators with stiff courtesy. Somewhere among them, perhaps, was someone who wanted all of that to fail. Cost comes later, he said. You deal with what is in front of you first. Soraya studied his face for several seconds. That is why you returned to Orizon. Ethan did not answer. People were in front of you. Yes. Even strangers. Especially strangers. Friends know you will come back for them. Strangers do not. The words left him before he could make them smaller. Soraya became very still. For a woman raised in a culture where strength meant needing no one, the idea seemed to reach somewhere deeper than argument. Humans are remarkably inefficient, she said softly. Ethan nodded. We get that a lot. A ceremonial chime sounded. 1 hour remaining. Commander Varek approached with a tablet. Final security sweep complete. No unauthorized personnel detected. Environmental systems normal. All entrances secured electronically. Ethan looked at the last sentence on the display. Electronically. Varek sighed. Yes, Mr. Cole. Ethan glanced toward the mechanical bolt. Good. Soraya started toward the preparation chamber, then stopped beside him. Ethan. Yes. If something happens today, what exactly will you do? The noise of Concord Hall seemed to recede for a moment. Ethan looked at the woman everyone expected him to protect, then at the hundreds of people who had entered believing this place was safe. He adjusted his cuff and answered with the simplest truth he had. My job. Soraya tilted her head. Which is? Ethan held her gaze. Make sure tomorrow still has you in it. She said nothing. Then a soft tone sounded in Ethan's earpiece. Security Channel 4 had just gone offline. A second tone followed. Channel 7 disappeared. Ethan's eyes moved toward the main doors. Outside, someone had begun disabling the station one piece at a time. The third security channel vanished before Ethan reached the center of the hall. No warning. No static. Just another green indicator turning gray inside his earpiece display. He touched 2 fingers to the receiver. Commander Varek, switched to local communication. Nothing answered. Ethan looked toward the eastern security post. Varek was 20 yards away, speaking urgently to 2 officers whose tablets had gone dark. That was confirmation enough. The ceremony had not started yet, but nearly every seat was occupied. Hundreds of diplomats sat beneath the crystalline ceiling while translators whispered in dozens of languages. Above them, banners from rival worlds moved gently in the conditioned air. The ventilation was working again. Ethan almost wished it was not. Soraya. She heard the change in his voice immediately. What happened? Communications are dropping. Station failure? Too selective. The lights dimmed. Conversations faltered across the hall. For 1 second, everything became strangely quiet. Then emergency illumination activated, washing the walls in pale silver. Ethan counted automatically. 1, 2, 3. The main doors remained open. 4. A service entrance on the western side closed by itself. 5. 2 security cameras rotated away from the diplomatic platform. 6. Ethan moved. Behind me. Soraya did not argue this time. That worried him more than resistance would have. Around the hall, several guests rose from their seats. Some looked confused. Others looked toward the exits. Then Ethan noticed the ones who did neither. A figure near the northern aisle remained perfectly still. Another beside the western gallery did the same. A third stood near the translation station, hands empty, attention fixed on Soraya. Ethan's mind connected positions faster than names. They were spaced deliberately, too evenly, too calmly. Varek, Ethan called across the room. The commander turned. Ethan pointed toward Soraya, and then toward the floor, using the simplest field signal he knew. Protect. Hold position. Varek understood. His officers began moving without creating panic. Then every electronic door in Concord Hall unlocked at once. The sound was soft, almost polite. Click, click, click. A dozen entrances opened around the chamber. Ethan felt the temperature drop against his face. Soraya whispered, That cannot happen accidentally. We finally agree on something. People began entering through the newly opened passages. Not running, not shouting, simply walking into the hall with unsettling coordination. Some wore station uniforms. Others wore diplomatic clothing. None appeared interested in the delegates nearest them. Their attention converged on one place. Soraya. Ethan counted until counting stopped being useful. More than 20. Perhaps 30. Varek's officers shifted into a protective ring, but their networked equipment was failing one system at a time. Ethan looked toward the main entrance behind him, still open. Beyond it stretched a bright corridor leading toward the station's secured diplomatic wing. An escape route. Soraya saw it too. We can reach the outer corridor. Ethan listened. Footsteps sounded beyond that doorway. Many footsteps. Then they stopped just outside his line of sight. Nobody entered. Nobody called for assistance. Nobody identified themselves. They were waiting. The final piece settled into place. The people inside were not the whole operation. Ethan stepped backward toward the entrance. Cole, Soraya said. What are you doing? Changing the room. He reached the doorway and looked once into the corridor. Shadows moved beyond the corner. Too many for a rescue team. He pulled the heavy door inward. Soraya followed him with disbelief in her amber eyes. That is our clearest exit. That is what they want us to think. The door closed with a deep metallic groan. Ethan wrapped his hand around the old mechanical lever he had noticed 6 hours earlier. Cold steel. No electronics. No remote access. Nothing outside could command it. He pushed the bolt home. Clang. The sound carried through Concord Hall, sharp enough that several heads turned. Soraya stared at the sealed door, then at Ethan. You just trapped us in here. Ethan listened to the sudden movement outside. Someone had finally reached the door. Too late. A strange calm settled over him. 6 hours of suspicion had become certainty. He looked across the hall at the figures who had expected an easy escape route, then back at Soraya. For the first time that day, Ethan smiled. No, he said softly. I changed who gets to use the door. The smile vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Ethan turned from the door and studied the hall as a system instead of a room. 400 frightened guests. 30 suspicious figures. 6 VAR officers still close enough to Soraya to matter. Electronic security compromised. Communications unreliable. Environmental controls uncertain. The crystal floor beneath his shoes carried every hurried footstep like a drum. Varric, Ethan called. Move the delegates behind the central platform. Keep the aisles clear. The commander hesitated only a fraction of a second before obeying. That fraction told Ethan something had changed. Varric no longer saw him as ceremonial baggage from Earth. Soraya with me. I can defend myself. Good. That makes my job easier. Ethan crossed toward a service console while the unfamiliar figures began closing distance from several directions. They did not rush. They expected panic to do their work for them. Ethan refused to provide any. He pulled the console cover open and found 3 manual controls beneath the dead display. Fire suppression, emergency lighting, ventilation isolation. Human engineers would have labeled them. VAR engineers apparently considered labels an insult to intelligence. Which one controls the suppression system? He asked. Soraya pointed to the center lever. Why? Because everyone can see too well. He pulled it. A warning tone sounded overhead, followed by a sudden hiss as harmless white suppression vapor poured from ceiling ports. Within seconds, the far half of Concord Hall disappeared behind rolling mist. Delegates gasped. Ethan heard Varric ordering them to remain calm. You blinded the room, Soraya said. No. I changed who knows the room. Ethan had spent 6 hours memorizing distances. 22 feet from the platform to the western column. 34 to the service alcove. 12 from the alcove to the gallery stairs. The intruders had prepared for cameras, electronic locks, and predictable security formations. They had not prepared for a human who had become bored enough to count steps. Ethan guided Soraya through the mist. 3 steps left. She followed instantly. Duck. She did. A service drone drifted overhead, confused by the emergency signal. 7 forward. You memorized all of this? I had a long morning. A shape appeared through the vapor ahead. Soraya moved before Ethan could speak, stepping sideways and using her commanding voice. Security checkpoint is east. Identify yourself. The figure stopped. Just long enough. Ethan changed direction, leading her behind a crystalline support column. That was useful. I command 12 fleets. You mentioned that. I was concerned you had forgotten. Despite everything, he almost laughed. A low mechanical vibration passed through the floor. Ethan felt it through his shoes. The ventilation system was changing pressure. Someone outside was trying to clear the suppression vapor remotely. They still control environmental systems, Soraya said. For now. Ethan looked upward. The western vents began pulling mist away. He crossed to the ceremonial fountain beside the platform and examined its pressure housing. Please tell me you are not about to destroy a diplomatic monument. I am developing cultural appreciation. He opened the maintenance valve instead. Water stopped flowing through the decorative channels, and the pressure gauge climbed as the fountain redirected into emergency reserve lines. Soraya stared at him. How did you know those systems were connected? I asked this morning. Her expression changed. The fountains, the ventilation, the doors. Every ridiculous question she had watched him ask had been preparation. Ethan was not improvising because he lacked a plan. Improvisation was the plan. What exactly were you before Earth assigned you to me? She asked. Ethan watched the mist thin across the hall. Varric had moved most delegates into protected positions. Good. The unfamiliar figures were being forced into narrower approaches. Better. Rescue specialist. That is not what I meant. It is the answer. A sharp electronic tone interrupted them. Ethan's portable scanner, independent from the station network, had detected a new signal. He pulled it from his coat and studied the display. One encrypted transmission was repeating from somewhere inside Concord Hall. Not a communication channel. A synchronization pulse. Soraya leaned closer. What is that? Something our visitors are carrying. The pulse repeated every 8 seconds. Ethan followed its direction across the room. Then his expression hardened. The signal was not moving toward Soraya. It was moving toward the main door. They are trying to leave, she said. Some of them are. Then unlock the door and let them. No. Ethan watched the signal approach the sealed entrance. Outside, the waiting footsteps had returned. Inside, someone was moving to meet them. 2 teams. 1 door. 1 coordinated plan. You still think locking us inside was safer? Soraya asked. Ethan looked at the mechanical bolt, then at the scanner counting down toward another pulse. I think this was never only about reaching you. The pulse flashed again. Stronger now. Ethan finally understood what had bothered him about the entire operation. Assassins wanted access to a target. These people wanted control of the building. He turned to Soraya. They did not come here just to stop the treaty. Then what did they come for? Soraya asked. Ethan watched the synchronization pulse blink across his scanner again. 8 seconds. Perfectly regular. The signal originated near the main entrance, but its destination was somewhere below them. He lowered the scanner toward the crystal floor. The reading strengthened. Something underneath Concord Hall. Soraya's expression sharpened. There is nothing beneath us except station infrastructure. Infrastructure is usually important. Ethan touched his earpiece. Varric, I need the hall schematics. Local copy only. The commander appeared through thinning white vapor 20 feet away and tossed Ethan a hardened data tablet. Network access is gone. That might be helping us. Ethan opened the structural map. Power conduits. Water recycling. Environmental lines. Emergency shelters. Then he found a chamber directly beneath the diplomatic platform marked with a VAIR security classification. What is this? Soraya looked at the screen and became still. The treaty archive. Meaning, every delegation deposited authenticated copies of its military withdrawal codes there before the ceremony. They cannot command fleets, but they can verify whether an order is genuine. Ethan understood immediately. So if somebody steals them, they can make a false order look real. For several minutes, perhaps. Several minutes is plenty when fleets are staring at each other. Another pulse flashed. Ethan looked toward the figures moving through the hall. They had never needed to reach Soraya first. They needed everyone to believe she was the target while someone accessed the archive. They want both sides confused at the same time, he said. A false withdrawal. A false advance. One frightened commander makes the wrong decision, and the treaty dies before anyone discovers the signal was forged. Soraya looked across the room at diplomats sheltering behind the platform. Her voice became quiet. Millions could believe the other side betrayed them. Ethan nodded. Now we know what we are protecting. She turned toward him. You mean the archive? I mean everyone. The answer stopped her. Ethan handed the tablet back to Varric. Can your officers hold this hall? Yes. Good. Keep the guests away from the main entrance. Nobody opens that door. Varric glanced toward the mechanical bolt. And you? I'm going downstairs. Soraya stepped beside him. We are going downstairs. No, that sounded like an order again. It was. Then it was poorly aimed. Ethan met her amber eyes. Soraya, whoever planned this knows VAIR systems, VAIR security, and this station. You are the person they came prepared to predict. And you are not. Apparently humans are difficult paperwork. She almost smiled, but her gaze remained steady. You do not know the archive protocols. I do. Ethan disliked the logic because it was good. Stay behind me. You are very attached to that phrase. It has excellent survival statistics. They moved toward a narrow service stairwell behind the diplomatic platform. The air grew cooler as they descended. Emergency strips painted the walls silver. After 20 feet, the noise of the hall faded until Ethan could hear only their footsteps and the low vibration of station machinery. Soraya broke the silence. You said everyone. What? When I asked what we were protecting, Ethan kept his attention on the stairs. There are 400 people upstairs. Some of them have spent years opposing my government. Still people. And you would risk yourself for them? Ethan stopped at the bottom landing. A sealed archive corridor waited ahead. That question keeps surprising you. Because your answer keeps making no sense by Vare standards. Ethan looked at her. Back on Orizon, I learned something. When an alarm starts, everyone thinks rescue means knowing who deserves to come out first. He placed his palm against the manual release beside the corridor door. It does not. You get whoever you can reach. Soraya said nothing. The silver markings at her temples brightened faintly in the dark. Ethan opened the door. Beyond it stretched a narrow corridor lined with dormant security panels. At the far end, the treaty archive stood open. It should have been sealed. A portable device rested beside the entrance, its indicator flashing once every 8 seconds. Soraya stared at it. They are already inside. Ethan listened to the machinery humming beneath the floor. Then another sound reached him from behind the archive door. A voice speaking fluent Vare military code. Soraya's face changed. She recognized it. That authorization belongs to someone in my delegation, she whispered. Ethan looked at the open archive and finally understood why every security system had failed so cleanly. The enemy had never broken into Concord Hall. Someone with legitimate authority had let them in. Do not move, Ethan whispered. Soraya stood beside him at the bottom of the service stairwell, her amber eyes fixed on the open treaty archive. The corridor smelled of cold metal and recycled air. Every 8 seconds, the portable device beside the archive flashed pale blue. Ethan counted 2 cycles before speaking again. That signal is not opening the archive. It is keeping something synchronized. Soraya listened to the voice beyond the doorway. I know the authorization sequence. Her words came slowly. Only 5 members of my delegation possess that clearance. Can you identify the speaker? Another coded phrase echoed from inside. Soraya's silver temple markings dimmed. Counselor Varen. Ethan remembered him. Tall. Formal. 60 years old by human comparison. One of the officials who had argued most strongly that the ceremony could not be postponed. How much authority does he have? Enough to authenticate diplomatic systems. Not enough to access military withdrawal codes alone. Ethan looked at the flashing device. That explains why he brought friends. A soft tone came from the archive. Soraya's expression tightened. They have begun copying the verification signatures. Ethan checked the corridor behind them. No movement yet. How long? Perhaps 4 minutes. Can you stop it remotely? Not with the network compromised. Manual shutdown? She pointed toward a recessed panel approximately 15 feet inside the archive. There. Ethan studied the distance. The archive chamber was circular, lined with crystalline data columns that glowed like frozen lightning. Several figures stood around the central terminal, focused on the transfer. Counselor Varen was among them. No one appeared to have noticed Ethan and Soraya in the dark corridor. You stay here, Ethan said. Soraya gave him a look he was beginning to recognize. We discussed your habit of issuing impossible instructions. I remember losing that discussion. Ethan removed his independent scanner and adjusted its frequency to match the synchronization pulse. What are you doing? Making their equipment lie. Can you do that? No idea. That is not reassuring. I was not hired to reassure you. Her eyes narrowed at the familiar line, but Ethan saw the smallest hint of amusement. Good. If she could still be annoyed, she could still think. He waited for the next pulse. 8 seconds. The scanner caught it. Ethan delayed the return signal by half a second. The portable device blinked yellow. Inside the archive, someone complained that the transfer had lost synchronization. Ethan did it again. Yellow. Another interruption. You are confusing the handshake, Soraya whispered. I prefer annoying it. That is not technically accurate. Neither is what they are doing. A warning tone sounded from the archive. Counselor Varen stepped toward the portable device. Ethan stopped transmitting. The indicator returned to blue. Varen hesitated, then went back inside. Soraya stared at Ethan. You made him believe the problem corrected itself. People trust machines when machines tell them what they want to hear. He looked toward the manual shutdown panel. I need 20 seconds. For what? To turn off the archive. And then, Ethan glanced upward, toward hundreds of diplomats waiting one level above. Then their plan changes. You say that as though it is good. Predictable plans are dangerous. Broken plans make people improvise. And humans are better at improvising? Ethan gave her a brief look. You have met us. He synchronized his breathing with the 8-second pulse. When the indicator flashed again, he stepped silently through the doorway. Soraya followed. Ethan turned, irritated, but she pointed toward a second control on the opposite wall. The archive requires 2 manual authorizations to shut down. Of course it did. You might have mentioned that. You told me to stay behind. Fair point. They moved along opposite sides of the chamber, using the glowing data columns as cover. 15 feet became 10, then 5. Soraya reached her control. Ethan reached his. Their eyes met across the chamber. She raised 3 fingers. 2. 1. They pressed simultaneously. Every data column went dark. The synchronization device stopped flashing. Silence swallowed the room. Counselor Varen turned slowly. Soraya. There was no surprise in his voice. Only disappointment. You should have remained upstairs. Soraya stepped into view, her posture straight and regal. You should have remembered who gave you your authority. Varen looked past her toward Ethan. And you brought the human. Ethan heard something then. Not from the archive. From his earpiece. Commander Varek's local channel had returned for less than a second, carrying a fragmented message from upstairs. Cole, outer security claims they are reinforcement. They demand that we open the main entrance. The transmission died. Ethan looked toward Soraya. The synchronization device had stopped, but the operation had not. Now he understood the second team outside the hall. They were waiting for the archive's signatures to leave Concord Hall with them. Do not let Varek open that door, Ethan said. Varen smiled faintly. It is already too late. Ethan looked at the dark archive columns. No, he said. That is exactly why I locked it. Too late for what? Soraya asked. Counselor Varen remained beside the dark central terminal, his expression almost peaceful. For stopping what comes next, he said. Ethan ignored the performance and listened instead. The archive cooling system hummed beneath the floor. Somewhere above them, Concord Hall carried a faint vibration through the station structure. Repeated. Rhythmic. Someone outside was testing the main door. How do the verification signatures leave this room? Ethan asked. Soraya glanced toward a narrow data port beside the disabled terminal. Normally through the diplomatic network. Network is down. Then they require physical transfer. Ethan looked at Varen. The counselor's confidence suddenly made sense. Which means somebody has to carry them out. Varen said nothing. Ethan smiled without warmth. That is why your second team is outside. Soraya's gaze hardened. You intended to manufacture conflicting fleet orders, then evacuate under the appearance of station security. I intended to prevent surrender disguised as peace, Varen replied. Our people have survived because we understand strength. Soraya stepped forward. Strength without judgment is merely fear wearing armor. Ethan glanced at her. That sounded different from the woman who had told him hours earlier that leaders prove their worth by protecting themselves. Varen heard the difference too. His attention shifted toward Ethan. The human has influenced you. He asked inconvenient questions. Humans often do. Ethan checked his scanner. A new signal had appeared. Not 8 seconds now. Continuous. It came from somewhere inside the archive. He rotated slowly until the indicator peaked near one of Varen's attendants. Soraya, behind me. Again. Please. That word changed everything. She moved immediately. Ethan raised the scanner. Someone in this room is still transmitting. Varen's calm finally cracked. He turned toward his own people. One attendant stepped backward. Ethan saw a small transfer module clipped beneath the edge of the man's formal coat. No confrontation was necessary. Soraya spoke one command in Vare, sharp enough to freeze everyone in place. Put it on the floor. The attendant hesitated, then obeyed. A palm-sized device landed softly on the crystal surface. Ethan approached without touching it. The display showed a completed transfer package waiting for external authentication. They already copied part of the signatures, Soraya said. Can it transmit through the walls? Not far. The archive shielding blocks long-range communication. Ethan looked upward. So it has to reach the hall. Varen's eyes moved toward the stairwell. Ethan noticed. Varek, Ethan called through his earpiece. Static answered. Then a broken voice pushed through. Cole, we have a problem. Only one. Outer security has overridden station command. They say an emergency evacuation order has been issued. Ethan looked at Soraya. Do not open the main door. I was not planning to. Varek paused. They are threatening to force entry. Ethan's pulse slowed. There it was. The outside team no longer needed permission. They needed proximity to the transfer module. If the archive data reached them, even briefly, the false orders could gain enough legitimacy to create chaos between the fleets. Varek, move every diplomat away from the entrance. Use the central platform as shelter. Keep that bolt closed. Understood. Ethan ended the channel. Soraya watched him. We need to destroy the transfer module. Maybe. If we destroy it, we destroy evidence. Ethan crouched beside the device. If we keep it, they keep trying to reach it. Then what do you suggest? Ethan looked toward the service schematics embedded beside the archive controls. A maintenance conduit ran from this level to an emergency observation compartment 40 feet below. It was narrow, manually sealed, and isolated from the station network. One person could carry the module there and lock it behind physical shielding. I take this downstairs. Soraya immediately understood. No, that compartment will isolate the signal. And isolate you. That is the useful part. Her amber eyes flashed. You are not sacrificing yourself for a machine. Not for the machine. Ethan stood and looked toward the ceiling, toward 400 strangers above them and 2 fleets beyond the atmosphere. For the time it buys everyone else. Soraya stepped closer. You told me humans rescue whoever they can reach. Correct. Then perhaps you should remember that you are currently within reach. Ethan had no answer ready. For once, Soraya seemed pleased to have silenced him. She picked up the transfer module before he could stop her. What are you doing? Apparently learning from humans. She moved toward the maintenance conduit. Ethan followed. Soraya, your duty is to protect me. Exactly. She stopped at the hatch and looked back at him. And mine. Ethan stared at her. Hours earlier, he would have said she did not have one. Now the answer felt different. Soraya gave him a small, determined smile. I believe it is my turn to decide who gets rescued. Give me the module, Ethan said. Soraya held it against her palm and regarded him with infuriating calm. The maintenance hatch beside her stood open, revealing a narrow conduit descending toward the isolated observation compartment. Cold air drifted upward, carrying the dry metallic smell of machinery. You have spent all day telling me what your duty requires, she said. I listened. This is different. Because now I am the one making the decision? Ethan opened his mouth, found no useful answer, and heard a heavy vibration travel through the ceiling. The outer team was still working on the main entrance above. They were running out of time. Soraya, that compartment can shield the signal, but once the emergency seal closes, reopening it manually could take several minutes. Then we should not waste them arguing. She stepped toward the hatch. Ethan caught the edge of the door before she could enter. There is another option. He pointed to the conduit map. We carry it halfway down, seal the upper partition, then use the secondary maintenance relay to broadcast the evidence instead of the signatures. Soraya studied the diagram. The relay is disconnected from the diplomatic network. Exactly. Whoever compromised Concord Hall cannot control what is not connected to it. Can it reach Commander Varek? Better. It can reach every emergency receiver on the station. Understanding brightened her amber eyes, including the delegations and their ships. Soraya looked toward Counselor Varen. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. Ethan noticed and knew they had found the right answer. Not destruction, exposure. They entered the conduit together, moving down a steep metal ladder until they reached a maintenance junction 20 feet below the archive. Ethan opened the relay housing while Soraya connected the transfer module through an isolated diagnostic port. The equipment was old, simple, and gloriously independent. I require 30 seconds to authenticate my identity, she said. You have 20. Humans negotiate badly. We negotiate fast. Above them came another deep metallic sound. Ethan's earpiece crackled. Cole, Varek said through heavy interference. The main door is holding, but but outer security has activated emergency override procedures. The override cannot move a mechanical bolt. They appear to have discovered that. Ethan almost smiled. Keep everyone back. Soraya placed her hand against the authentication plate. Silver light traced across her fingers. Identity confirmed, the relay announced. Emergency transmission available. Ethan connected his scanner and uploaded the synchronization records, false credentials, archive access logs, and the transfer module's stored commands. Send everything, he said. Soraya looked at him. To whom? Everyone. She understood immediately. All station emergency channels, she ordered. All diplomatic receivers. All fleet verification systems. Full transparency. The relay hummed. A progress indicator climbed. 20%. 40. 60. Then the lights flickered. Ethan looked upward. They found the power system. 80%. The relay dimmed. Soraya pressed both hands against the console as if determination alone could keep electricity flowing. 92. The hum weakened. Ethan reached into the housing and switched the relay to its independent emergency cell. The screen brightened again. 100%. Transmission complete. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then Ethan's earpiece came alive with dozens of overlapping signals. Ver command. Neutral station control. Foreign delegations. Fleet officers demanding verification. The conspiracy had depended on uncertainty. Ethan and Soraya had answered with information delivered to everyone at once. Commander Varek's voice finally broke through. Cole, both fleets have suspended all movement. External command has rejected the evacuation order. Legitimate station security is taking control of the outer corridor. Ethan released a breath he had not realized he was holding. Soraya closed her eyes briefly. It worked. Mostly. I dislike celebrating before I can see the door. They climbed back toward the archive. When they reached the upper hatch, Soraya stopped. Ethan. He looked down. She remained one rung below him. Cobalt skin washed silver by emergency light. Earlier you said strangers do not know whether someone will come back for them. I remember. I think I understand now. Ethan waited. Your people do not make sacrifice sacred, she said. You make the person being saved matter. Before Ethan could answer, the station shook with a low mechanical thud from above. His earpiece snapped alive. Cole, Varek said urgently. The outside team is retreating, but someone inside the hall is attempting to open the main entrance manually. Ethan climbed faster. Soraya followed. They emerged into the archive corridor and ran for the stairs. By the time they reached Concord Hall, the suppression mist had nearly cleared. Delegates remained behind the central platform. Varek's officers held the aisles. At the far end, a figure stood at the main door with one hand reaching toward the bolt. Ethan was too far away. Soraya was closer. She moved without hesitation, crossed the final distance, and slammed the secondary mechanical latch into place. Clang. The sound echoed through the hall exactly as Ethan's had before. She turned toward him. For the first time, Soraya wore that same small, impossible smile. I finally understand why you like doors, she said. Ethan stopped beside her and listened as legitimate station security announced itself from the outer corridor. Careful, he replied. Next you will start asking inconvenient questions. Soraya kept her hand on the bolt. I learned from a human. 3 weeks later, Concord Hall smelled like polished crystal and fresh coffee instead of coolant and uncertainty. Ethan considered that progress. The damaged security network had been replaced, the ventilation system had been rebuilt, and every electronic access point now required independent verification from 2 separate systems. Someone had also removed the old mechanical bolt from the main entrance. Ethan had complained until they put it back. Soraya found him there before the second treaty ceremony, testing the bolt with one hand while technicians pretended not to notice. You realize the station engineers have begun referring to that device as the human security system, she said. Ethan pushed the lever once. Solid. Finally, appropriate respect for advanced Earth technology. Soraya smiled. In the weeks since the failed conspiracy, something about her had changed. She still carried the same quiet authority, still commanded 12 fleets, still made entire rooms straighten when she entered. But she listened differently now. Counselor Varin and the others involved in the conspiracy had been taken into lawful custody, and the evidence Ethan and Soraya transmitted had reached both fleets before false orders could create confusion. The negotiations had survived because everyone received the truth at the same moment. No rumors. No competing versions. Just evidence. Commander Varek approached from across the hall. Mr. Cole, the Earth delegation wishes to present you with the Interstellar Civil Service Medal after the signing. Ethan frowned. Can I decline? You already did. Good. They declined your decline. Ethan sighed. Soraya looked delighted. A difficult diplomatic situation. I preferred the locked door. Varek almost smiled before returning to his post. Ethan watched him go. 3 weeks earlier, the commander had treated him like an unnecessary human attachment. Now Varek had personally requested that Ethan review every physical security measure in the station. Humans, Ethan thought, had an unfortunate tendency to become respected immediately after causing everyone administrative problems. Why refuse the medal? Soraya asked. Because I did my job. Your job description did not include protecting 400 diplomats, exposing a conspiracy, or preventing 2 fleets from misreading fabricated orders. Bad paperwork. Ethan. He looked at her. The humor left her expression, replaced by something quieter. Why? He knew what she was really asking. Why return for strangers? Why close a door when escape remained possible? Why place another person's tomorrow beside your own and decide both mattered? Ethan looked through the transparent wall. Vallis turned slowly below them, violet clouds drifting across silver oceans. Beyond the planet, somewhere too distant for the eye, 2 fleets were withdrawing according to the real treaty. Because somebody had to, he said. Soraya considered the answer. That is frustratingly simple. Most important things are. The ceremonial chimes sounded. Delegates began entering. This time nobody looked suspiciously at Ethan's questions. Security officers actually answered them. He was not sure he liked that. Soraya started toward the platform, then noticed he had remained beside the entrance. Are you coming? 3 weeks earlier, she had walked ahead, while her human guard followed at the proper diplomatic distance. Ethan remembered it clearly. So did she. He stepped beside her instead. They crossed the hall together. Hours later, after the signatures were complete and the last formal speech had ended, they stood alone on an observation balcony. Stars filled the glass beyond them. Soraya rested one hand on the door leading back inside. There was another mechanical bolt mounted beside it. She touched the lever thoughtfully. Should I lock it? Ethan looked at the quiet hall beyond the doorway. Leave it unlocked. That seems unlike you. Maybe. She tilted her head. Why? Ethan watched starlight reflect across the silver markings at her temples. I think we are done being afraid of what is on the other side. Soraya studied him for a long moment, then released the bolt. The door remained open. Neither of them moved to close it. Somewhere behind them, human and alien voices mingled beneath the crystal ceiling, no longer separated by alarms, suspicion, or locked systems. Ethan had not conquered anything. He had not needed to. He had simply refused to abandon people when leaving would have been easier, and somewhere along the way, an alien woman raised to believe strength meant standing alone had learned another definition. Sometimes strength was staying. Sometimes it was returning. And sometimes it was leaving the door open because, finally, you trusted someone to walk through it beside you.